BTS is back, feel the attack.
Welcome to BTS Lover channel. New Year's Eve always has its own way of leaving unforgettable traces. The seconds leading into a new year are usually filled with laughter, joyful shouts, and quiet wishes hidden deep in the heart. But during the transition into 2026, there was one small, almost unplanned moment that made many armies fall silent, smile softly, and then wonder, was this just a coincidence, or was there a warmth that simply couldn't be hidden? That night, the room was filled with lively yet intimate energy. The BTS members gathered while waiting for the countdown, some sitting comfortably, others standing, joking around freely. There was no grand stage, no overwhelming spotlight, just togetherness that felt real. Amid the laughter and noise, their positions shifted naturally, as if following the spontaneous rhythm of the night. Jimin was seen sitting with a bright expression, his eyes sparkling as if he were already counting down in his head. Behind him stood Jungkook, leaning slightly forward, seemingly trying to get a clearer view of what was happening. The distance between them was close enough to be noticed, yet still completely natural. Then a small gesture happened, something simple, yet destined to steal attention. In a light but affectionate tone, Jimin asked Jungkook to sit beside him. A simple request, not dramatic, not exaggerated. Yet that was exactly where its warmth lay. It felt as if Jimin wanted to make sure that the New Year's moment was shared without distance between them. But no one expected what happened next. Standing beside Jungkook, Jin suddenly reacted quickly. With his signature spontaneous energy, Jin pushed Jungkook forward. It wasn't a rough shove, but a playful, reflexive move, still enough to change the situation in an instant. Jungkook lost his balance and nearly fell forward. And at that moment, time seemed to slow down. Jimin moved instantly. His hands reached out, his body leaning forward as he caught Jungkook before he could fully fall. There were no screams, no panic, just pure instinct, an instinct born from closeness and quiet attentiveness. But what made the moment truly different wasn't just the catch. After Jungkook was safe, Jimin didn't immediately let go. His hand lingered, then gently stroked Jungkook's head. A brief, tender touch, almost instinctive, as if to say, "It's okay, I'm here." Jungkook's startled expression slowly turned into a small smile, a smile that didn't feel staged but genuine, the kind that appears only when someone feels truly safe. Around them, the other members reacted in different ways. Some laughed out loud, some looked surprised, and others simply watched in silence, as if they knew they had just witnessed something more than a joke. Jin himself looked both shocked and amused, realizing that his playful action had unexpectedly created such a soft moment. For ARMY, this incident felt like a small fragment of a much longer story still unfolding. There was no confession, no grand words, just simple actions that spoke louder than 1,000 sentences. In the middle of a New Year's transition, while everyone was busy making wishes for the future, BTS quietly showed that true warmth often appears in the simplest moments. Was it merely the reflex of a close friend? Or yet another sign of a bond too deep to be explained by logic? Those questions may continue to echo. But one thing is certain. On that night, on the threshold of 2026, ARMY witnessed a moment that will be remembered not for its drama, but for its sincerity. As the echoes of laughter slowly settled, and the room returned to its warm, buzzing rhythm, the moment between Jimin and Jungkook did not simply disappear into the noise of celebration. Instead, it lingered, quietly, stubbornly, like a memory that refuses to fade no matter how many new seconds pass. The countdown continued, voices overlapping, numbers shouted with excitement, yet for many who were watching closely, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Jungkook, now seated beside Jimin as originally intended, adjusted himself slightly, shoulders still tense from the sudden surprise. His laughter came a beat later than usual, softer, almost shy. Jimin, on the other hand, remained close, their shoulders brushing in a way that felt effortless, unforced. There was no dramatic reaction, no exaggerated embarrassment, only a calm that suggested familiarity, the kind that comes from countless unspoken understandings built over years. Jin, realizing the impact of his spontaneous move, raised his hands in mock surrender, laughter spilling out as he jokingly protested his innocence. The room responded immediately. Teasing remarks, playful complaints, and amused groans filled the air. Yet even as the others leaned into the humor of the situation, the emotional aftertaste of that brief interaction refused to dissolve completely. Because this was not the first time ARMY had witnessed something like this. For longtime fans, moments of instinctive care between Jimin and Jungkook have always existed in quiet corners. Glances exchanged during rehearsals, hands reaching out during chaotic stages, subtle shifts in posture that signal comfort and protection. What made this New Year's Eve moment different was its timing. At the threshold of a new chapter, with the weight of passing years behind them and unknown days ahead, that small act of catching and comforting felt symbolic. As the countdown reached its final numbers, voices grew louder. 10, 9, 8. Jimin leaned forward slightly, eyes bright, counting along with the others. Jungkook followed, his voice steady now, confidence returning with every number shouted into the air. Their shoulders touched again, this time without hesitation. 3, 2, 1. The room erupted. Cheers broke out, hands clapped, bodies leaned into one another. Someone shouted Happy New Year, while another laughed so hard they nearly fell off the couch. In the chaos, Jin pulled someone into a quick side hug, while others raised their arms in triumph. Confetti, real or imaginary, seemed to fill the space as joy took over completely. And yet, even amid the explosion of celebration, Jimin turned toward Jungkook. It was a brief glance, almost imperceptible, but it carried something gentle, reassuring, an unspoken acknowledgement of the moment they had just shared. Jungkook noticed. His lips curved upward, not into a wide grin, but into a soft smile meant for just one person. For ARMY watching later, replaying the footage again and again, that single exchange became a focal point. Screens were paused. Clips were slowed. Comments flooded timelines across platforms, each fan interpreting the moment through their own lens. Some called it pure friendship, the natural closeness of two people who grew up together. Others saw something deeper, an emotional language spoken without words, visible only to those paying close attention. What made the discussion even more intense was how natural it all looked. There was no stiffness, no sense of performance. Jimin's hand on Jungkook's head had been gentle, protective, instinctive. Jungkook's acceptance of it, no flinching, no awkward retreat, spoke volumes. These were not gestures calculated for the camera. They were reactions born in the moment, shaped by years of shared stages, shared struggles, shared dreams. As the night progressed, the members settled into quieter conversations. Some sat on the floor, backs against the couch, voices lowering as the adrenaline of midnight slowly faded. Others leaned back, exhausted but content, scrolling through messages or joking about resolutions they knew they might never keep. Jungkook laughed loudly at something Jin said, throwing his head back with familiar ease. Jimin watched him for a moment longer than necessary, then laughed too, the sound lighter, warmer. If anyone noticed, they didn't comment. If they did, they chose silence. And that silence said everything. Because within BTS, moments like these don't need explanation. They exist freely, without labels or declarations. Care is shown through action, not announcement. Comfort is offered without condition. And perhaps that is why such moments resonate so deeply, not only with ARMY, but with anyone who understands the power of quiet presence. As the early hours of 2026 unfolded, conversations drifted toward the future. Plans were mentioned casually, half-serious promises exchanged amid laughter. Someone spoke about rest, someone else about music. There were mentions of growth, of gratitude, of staying healthy, words spoken softly, yet weighted with sincerity. Through it all, Jimin and Jungkook remained close. Not dramatically close, not deliberately positioned, just there, side by side, sharing space the way people do when they don't need distance to breathe. For fans, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. The final moments of the old year and the first moments of the new were marked not by spectacle, but by instinctive care. Not by loud declarations, but by a gentle touch and a quick reaction that said, "I've got you." And maybe that's why this moment continues to live on. Because in an industry often defined by image and performance, what ARMY witnessed that night felt real, human, vulnerable. It reminded everyone that beneath the fame, the lights, and the endless expectations, there are people who still react on instinct, who still reach out when someone stumbles, who still offer comfort without thinking twice. As the night finally wound down and the celebrations softened into quiet exhaustion, the memory of that moment remained etched in the hearts of those who saw it. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was shocking, but because it was sincere. Closing. The New Year's Eve of 2026 will be remembered for many reasons. For laughter that echoed into the early morning, for promises whispered between friends, for the warmth of togetherness that only grows stronger with time. But for ARMY, one small moment will always stand out. A sudden stumble, a quick catch, and a gentle hand resting on a head, offering reassurance without words. Whether seen as friendship, brotherhood, or something deeper, one truth remains undeniable. The bond within BTS continues to reveal itself in the most unexpected, heartfelt ways. And as the years move forward, carrying new challenges and new dreams, moments like these remind us why their journey continues to be watched, cherished, and loved. Because sometimes, the most unforgettable stories are written not in grand gestures, but in the quiet seconds when someone falls and another is already there to catch them.